imagine that the air itself has changed, that it sits thicker in your chest, richer, almost sweet. There is no grass beneath your feet, no flowers anywhere on earth, no birdsong, not one note, because birds have not been invented yet. Something passes over you, and its shadow crosses the ground, like the shadow of a hawk. But it isn't a bird, it's a dragonfly. So let yourself wonder, slowly, what would you actually see in a world like that? What would you eat? What would wake you in the night? And how long do you think you'd last? What if you lived in the age of giant insects? Before we begin, tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is where you are. You're standing about 320 million years ago in a period geologists call the Carboniferous. The name means coal-bearing, and that's the first strange thing to understand here. This forest is not really a forest. It's a coal field that hasn't happened yet. Every trunk, every fallen frond, every collapsed root sinking into the black water at your ankles is a future seam of coal. The fuel that ran the steam engines and the factories began as the dripping, humming swamp you're standing in. You'd be walking through your own civilization's fuel while it was still green. Take a breath, and it feels wrong in a wonderful way. Too easy. The Carboniferous atmosphere held somewhere close to 30 or 31% oxygen. The air you're breathing right now is about 21, so every breath here delivers roughly half again as much oxygen as your body has ever known. For a while you'd feel superb, lightheaded, strong. You could climb longer, run further, hold your breath past anything you've managed before. But that air has a temper. Wood burns more easily in oxygen-rich air. Damp wood burns, green wood burns, slice into Carboniferous coal, and you find charcoal laced all through it, layer after layer. The ash of wildfires that swept a landscape that was soaking wet. Picture a swamp catching fire. Lightning strikes a dead trunk, and instead of hissing out in the rain, the flame takes hold and runs. Most weeks of your life here, there'd be smoke leaning across some part of the horizon. That heavy oxygen is also the reason for the shadow that just passed over you. Insects have no lungs. Their bodies are threaded with hollow pipes called tracheae, open to the air through small holes along their sides. And oxygen simply seeps down those pipes into the tissue. It's beautifully simple, and it has a hard ceiling. Past a certain body size, oxygen can't diffuse deep enough, fast enough, and the animal suffocates from the inside. That ceiling is why the largest beetle in your world is about the length of your hand. Raise the oxygen in the atmosphere, and the ceiling rises with it. So look up again and let it land. The creature circling over the open water is Meganeura. It looks like a dragonfly and hunts like one, but it isn't one. It belongs to an older, extinct group called griffinflies, cousins to modern dragonflies rather than ancestors. Its wingspan is around 65 to 70 centimeters, more than 2 feet, tip to tip. Hold your arms out and set your hands about as far apart as your shoulders are wide. That's the animal. Wider than a large seagull, it doesn't buzz. That's the detail everyone gets wrong. A wing that size beats slowly, and the sound is dry and papery. A stiff, crackling rustle, closer to someone shuffling cards near your ear. Its eyes take up most of its head, each one built from thousands of separate lenses, giving it a field of view that is very nearly a full sphere. There is almost nowhere around this animal it cannot see. It doesn't chase prey so much as intercept it, calculating where the target will be rather than where it is. The same trick that makes modern dragonflies successful in over 90% of their attacks. Its 6 legs fold forward into a spined basket, and when that basket closes around something in midair, the meal is already over. It eats on the wing. Now lower your eyes, because something is coming through the leaf litter, and it's much bigger. You hear it first as a long dragging hiss, like heavy rain on dry leaves. Then the ferns part, and what comes out is so long, your mind refuses to read it as one animal. Arthropleura, a millipede, and the largest land arthropod that has ever lived. Trackways and body fossils suggest a length up to 2.5 meters, close to 8 feet, with a body 50 centimeters across, wider than your shoulders, weighing about 50 kilograms, the length of a small car, roughly the mass of an adult human. It's armored in dozens of overlapping plates, each segment carrying its own pair of legs, and those legs move in traveling waves down its flanks. So walking looks like water flowing backwards along its body. Its footprints survive in stone. In Scotland and Nova Scotia, you can stand over a slab and see 2 parallel rows of small punctures running for meters across ancient mud. Arthropleura, out for a walk, long before anyone existed to be alarmed by it. Here's the mercy. For most of the time we've known this animal, we had no idea what its head looked like, because a millipede's head is soft and rarely fossilizes. Then researchers re-examined juvenile specimens from Mont-Sault-les-Mines in France and finally got a proper look. The mouth parts were built for plant matter, not flesh. Arthropleura almost certainly ate rotting wood, spores, and ferns. It could pass within arm's reach of you and simply keep going, which brings you to the trees and to your real problem. Look up the trunk beside you. The bark isn't bark as you know it. It's covered in diamond-shaped scars in a spiraling pattern, like reptile skin or the surface of a pineapple, each mark left by a fallen leaf. This is lepidodendron, the scale tree, standing up to 50 meters, taller than a 15-story building. And it isn't a tree in any modern sense. It's a club moss. Its closest living relatives are little creeping plants you could step on without noticing. It grew like a firework, mostly hollow, held up by a thick outer rind rather than a woody core, shooting upward as a single unbranched pole for years, then splitting into a crown at the very top, releasing its spores and dying. One flowering, one ending. Beside it stand calamites, horsetails the height of a house, ribbed and jointed like enormous green bamboo, whose living descendants are the knee-high horsetails you find by ditches. Nowhere in this scene is there a flower. No fruit, no berries, no nuts, no grain, no grass, nothing sweet, nothing that evolved to be eaten. You'd be standing inside the wettest, greenest forest the planet had yet produced and find almost nothing on the menu. Something moves at the base of the trunk, small enough that you'd almost miss it, a slim, quick shape, about 20 centimeters long, lizard-like, darting into a hollow stump. That's Hylonomus, and it deserves more of your attention than anything else here, because it's one of the earliest reptiles we know. Its remains were found inside the fossilized stumps of these very trees at Joggins in Nova Scotia, where rotted-out trunks worked as natural pit traps. That nervous little creature, hunting insects in the dark of a log, sits very near the root of a family tree that branches into crocodiles, into dinosaurs, into birds, and into the line that leads, eventually, to you. So on your first day here, the giant is harmless, the trees are moss, And the most important animal in sight is the size of your hand. But you haven't met the ground dwellers yet, and when night comes down over this swamp, the things that come out to hunt don't fly, and they don't eat ferns. Night here doesn't fall so much as rise. The light goes first at the ground, in the fern shadow, and drains slowly upward through 50 meters of hollow trunk until only the crowns are lit, and then those go too, and the swamp changes hands. There's a sound at your feet, like fingernails tapping a table, unhurried, deliberate. Something is walking over dead leaves with a hard, jointed step. When your eyes adjust, you see it side on against the pale water, a scorpion, and the reason you can see it clearly at that distance is that it's 70 centimeters long. That's Pulmonoscorpius. Its name means breathing scorpion, and it was found at a site called East Kirkton in Scotland, in what was once a hot spring beside a volcano. 70 centimeters is the length of your forearm plus your whole hand, roughly the size of a domestic cat if you took the cat and flattened it, armored it, and gave it a tail that curls up over its own back. Put it on a dinner plate, and it would overhang on every side. The largest scorpion alive today, the African emperor, tops out around 20 centimeters, and people keep those as pets. Here's something strange to hold on to. Every scorpion alive today glows. Put one under ultraviolet light, and its shell fluoresces a cold, chemical blue-green, bright enough to read by. Nobody is entirely sure why. There's real ultraviolet in moonlight, so there's a fair chance. And it is only a chance because fluorescence doesn't fossilize. That on a clear night in the Carboniferous, the ground was quietly lit with drifting blue-green shapes, moving slowly through the litter. What we do know is that Pulmonoscorpius had book lungs, could breathe air comfortably, and had eyes on top of its head, plus more along the edges of its shell. It hunted by vibration more than sight. It would feel you coming through the ground before you were anywhere near. Now, while you're standing very still, listen to the water. Something is dragging itself out of the shallows, and it is genuinely enormous. 2 meters, from a blunt shovel-shaped head to a heavy tail that scrapes a groove in the mud behind it. Broad as a door, it moves the way a piece of furniture would move if furniture could move. Not fast, not agile, just relentless. That's Hibbertopterus, a eurypterid, one of the sea scorpions. Though this one has taken to land, and we know exactly how it moved, because in 2005, a trackway was found near Glasgow, 6 meters long, carved into ancient sandstone. You can read the whole walk in it. The animal lumbered forward in a slow, jerky rhythm, its rearmost limbs pushing, its body sagging so heavily that the underside of the tail cut a continuous furrow down the center of the trail. It was, in every sense, out of its depth on land. It fed by raking sediment with spined limbs and pushing the scrapings toward its mouth, which sat, as it does in all these animals, in the middle of its underside, between the bases of its legs. While we're here, let me give you the best correction in this whole subject. For 25 years, textbooks and documentaries described a carboniferous animal called Megarachne, found in Argentina, as the largest spider that ever lived. 50-centimeter leg span, a spider the size of a human head. It appeared in television series, in books, in 1,000 childhood nightmares. Then, in 2005, the original fossil was re-examined properly for the first time. It wasn't a spider at all. It was a eurypterid, a relative of the animal, now dragging itself past you. The giant spider of the Carboniferous simply evaporated, quietly in a scientific paper. So no, there were no dog-sized spiders. Spiders in this world existed, and they were roughly the size of spiders. Something else, though, did get very large, and it's above you. Look up toward the last gray light, and you'll see wings the width of a briefcase drifting between the trunks. This is one of the Paleotictopterans, a whole extinct order of insects with no living equivalent at all. The largest of them, Mazothyros, had a wingspan pushing 55 centimeters. From a distance, they look wrong because they appear to have 6 wings instead of 4. They don't. Quite. They have 2 functional pairs, plus a small stiff extra pair of flaps on the first segment, permanently held out, doing nothing anyone can explain. And on the front of the head is the detail that makes them unforgettable. A beak, a long, rigid, 5-part sucking beak, sometimes a third of the body length, which it drove into plant tissue to drink from the reproductive organs of trees. We have fossil plants from this period with puncture scars in them and callus tissue grown around the wounds, which means the plant survived the bite and healed. The insect fed, the tree scarred over, the scar fossilized, and 300 million years later, we can still find the mark. That's the oldest evidence of insects feeding on plants that we possess. Now, step back from the water's edge because you have been standing near it for too long. There are eyes just under the surface, set close together on the top of a flattened skull, and they are large. Much larger than a hunting animal needs, unless it lives in water so dark and peat-stained that light barely enters it. This is Crassigyrinus, an early tetrapod about 1.5 meters long, and it is one of the oddest animals of the period. Its skull is deep and powerful, lined with 2 rows of teeth, and it could open its jaws wide and snap them shut with real force. And its limbs are almost comically tiny, front legs a few centimeters long, useless for walking, useless for holding anything. Whatever this animal's ancestors were doing on land, Crassigyrinus had turned around and gone back into the black water, and its body was simplifying itself to suit. It hunted the way a crocodile does, by waiting and then by being suddenly much closer than it was. But it wasn't the top predator here, and this is the part people never expect from a world famous for its insects. The largest, most dangerous animal in this entire landscape is a fish. Rhizodus hiberti was a lobe-finned fish, a relative of the lineage that produced the first land vertebrates, and it grew to something like 6 or 7 meters, longer than a car, longer than most rooms you have ever slept in. Its fangs reached 22 centimeters, the length of a kitchen knife, set in a jaw that could take an amphibian in half. It lived in fresh water, in these swamps, in channels sometimes barely deeper than the animal was long, which means it hunted in the shallows, at the edges, exactly where a large, slow animal would come down to drink. To put that in scale, the griffinfly overhead is the size of a seagull. The scorpion behind you is the size of a cat. The millipede in the ferns is the length of a car, and the fish 2 meters away, in water you cannot see into, is the length of the car and the millipede together. And here is the thing about all of them. Not one of these animals has ever encountered a human being. There is no fear of you, no learned caution, no instinct that says the upright shape is dangerous. That instinct took millions of years to teach the modern world, and none of it has been written yet. To everything in this swamp, you are simply a new animal, warm, slow, and standing in the open. There's only one problem with that, and you'll notice it around the third or fourth day. You'll be hungry, and in a world with no fruit, no grain, and no grass, the only real food is the thing that's currently watching you. Hunger arrives quietly, and it changes how you look at everything. By the third day, you'd stop seeing this place as a landscape and start seeing it as a pantry with almost nothing in it. No fruit, no grain, no roots worth digging. Ferns are mostly indigestible, and some are outright toxic. The great scale trees are hollow, fibrous columns of water and pith. But climb one, and they're climbable because they're soft. And up in the crown, you'd find the cones. Inside them, spores, fine, yellow, dry as talc, and produced in almost unbelievable quantities. Lycopod spores rained down through these forests in such volume that in some coal seams, the rock is made largely of them. They're edible in the way sawdust is edible, but here's what makes them worth knowing. That yellow powder is explosively flammable. Loose spores of modern club mosses, called lycopodium powder, were used for stage lighting and early photographic flash. Throw a handful into a flame, and it goes off in a soft orange fireball. In an atmosphere holding 30% oxygen, you'd never struggle to make fire again. A single spark into dry spore dust, and you have light, heat, and something that keeps the ground dwellers at a distance. So you'd eat what everything else here eats, which means you'd eat animals, which means going into the water. And the water in the Carboniferous is where things get genuinely beautiful. Wade into a quiet channel, and the first thing you might see, drifting a few centimeters above the mud, is an animal that has confounded every scientist who's ever examined it. It's about 35 centimeters long, soft, segmented, torpedo-shaped, with a tail fin. From the front of its body extends a long, flexible snout, ending in a claw lined with tiny teeth, and across the top of its body, on a rigid bar, sit its two eyes, mounted sideways, like the eyes of a hammerhead, on a stalk that has no equivalent anywhere in the animal kingdom. That's Tully monstrum, the Tully monster. Thousands of specimens have been found, all of them in one place, the Mazon Creek fossil beds of Illinois. And after 60 years of study, we still cannot confidently say what group of animals it belongs to. Vertebrate, some argue. Invertebrate, argue others, just as forcefully. It's the state fossil of Illinois. It's abundant, it's exquisitely preserved, and it remains a complete mystery. Watching one flex past you in the shallows, you'd be looking at something the 21st century still can't classify. Move out into deeper, clearer water, because not all of this world is swamp. There are warm, shallow seas here too, and the strangeness continues. A shark passes beneath you, no longer than your arm, and rising from its back is a flat-topped structure, like an ironing board or a shaving brush pressed sideways. That's Stethecanthus. The top surface of that odd platform is studded with enlarged, tooth-like scales, and so is the top of the animal's head, so that when it lowers its snout, the two rough patches face forward together. Only the males had it. Nobody knows what it was for. Display, probably, or holding on to a mate, or making the animal look from below as though it had an enormous open mouth. Nearby, smaller and quicker, swims Falcatus, barely 30 centimeters, sleek, with big forward-facing eyes, and the males carry a single long spine that rises from behind the head and then curves forward over the skull like a bent antenna. And from the Bear Gulch limestone in Montana comes one of the most remarkable fossils in the whole record, a female falcatus, preserved with the male's head spine held in her jaws. Two animals caught mid-courtship 324 million years ago and never separated since. And then, further out, the animal that gives even the sharks a wide berth. Edestus, a shark reaching perhaps 6 meters, and instead of rows of replaceable teeth, it grew a single curved whorl of them along the midline of each jaw, projecting forward beyond the mouth, like the blades of a pair of shears. Old teeth were never shed. They were pushed outward as new ones grew behind. So the animal carried its entire dental history, jutting out in front of its face. It most likely slashed through schools of fish with a vertical strike of the head. There is nothing alive today that eats like it. Back on land, in the leaf litter, one last group deserves a mention because they're the ones that actually won. If you sifted the insect fossils of the Carboniferous, roughly half of what you'd pull out would be cockroach relatives. Half. This period is sometimes called the Age of Cockroaches, with more justification than the Age of Giant Insects. They weren't giant. Most were 4 to 9 centimeters. Big but not monstrous. And they differ from modern roaches in having a long external egg-laying tube. They swarmed through the rotting wood in numbers that are difficult to picture. And they, unlike almost everything else in this chapter, are still here, essentially unchanged, in the dark corners of your world. Which brings us to how all of this ended. It didn't end in fire or asteroid. It ended with the weather. Around 305 million years ago, the climate of the tropics shifted. Ice was building at the South Pole, and as it did, the equatorial belt dried out. Rainfall became seasonal, then unreliable, and the great coal swamps, which needed permanent standing water to survive, began to break apart. Geologists call it the Carboniferous rainforest collapse. The continuous forest that had stretched across the tropics fragmented into isolated patches, like a lake drying into scattered pools. The scale trees, dependent on constant wet, largely disappeared and were replaced by tree ferns. The amphibians, which needed water for their eggs and their skin, collapsed with them, and the reptiles, the descendants of that nervous little animal in the hollow stump, quietly inherited what was left. Isolation in separate fragments drove them to diversify. The collapse of that world was, in a real sense, the making of ours. Then the oxygen fell. Through the Permian, it drifted down, and with it went the ceiling that had let insects grow so large. The dragonflies shrank and then vanished. Palearctoptera, with their beaks and their 6 apparent wings, went entirely, leaving no descendants at all. Arthropleura disappeared. Pulmonoscorpius disappeared, and they never came back. Oxygen levels rose again later, in the Cretaceous, and giant insects did not return, because by then the sky had been taken. Birds and pterosaurs were flying, and there is good evidence that the arrival of agile flying vertebrates capped insect body size permanently. A slow, seagull-sized dragonfly in a world with birds in it is not a predator. It's lunch, so the door closed twice, once by chemistry and once by competition. That's what really happened. The air thinned, the forests dried, the giants went down, and every trace of them was pressed into black rock and left there for us to burn. But tonight, let's imagine that it didn't. Let's imagine the ice never came, the swamps never dried, The oxygen never fell, and the whole of that living, dripping, humming world is still out there, unbroken, waiting, and that at some point today, without knowing quite how, you walked into it, because now you have to live in it. And the first thing you'd need to understand is the ground under your feet, which is not solid, is not stable, and is not entirely on your side. Start with the ground, because the ground here is a lie. It looks like earth. It's dark. It's slightly springy. It holds a footprint, but push a stick into it, and the stick keeps going. Half a meter, 2, and never finds bottom. What you're standing on isn't soil, it's peat. A saturated, half-decayed mattress of dead plant matter, meters thick. Floating on water it has never fully released. In places it quakes when you walk, step badly, and one leg vanishes to the hip, and the peat closes over it, cold and fibrous and grasping. There is no proper soil in this world, not the way you know it. Soil requires a long partnership between rock, root, and rot. And the rot side of that partnership is running badly behind. Lignin, the tough polymer that stiffens wood, is difficult to break down, and the fungi that dismantle it efficiently today were still scarce, or still catching up. So wood accumulated, trunks fell into standing water, where there was no oxygen to decay them, and simply stayed, layer on layer on layer, for 60 million years, until the weight of the world pressed them into coal, which means you'd be walking on top of an unburied forest. Every step is on the bodies of the trees that stood here before. What keeps you from sinking entirely is a hidden lattice under the surface. The scale trees anchored themselves with a strange organ called stigmaria, not really roots, more like 4 huge horizontal arms radiating out from the base of the trunk, each branching and rebranching, each covered in fine rootlets. They spread wide rather than deep, and across a whole forest, they interlock into an enormous woven raft. That raft is your floor. Learn to read it, the slight ridges, the firmer lines between pools, and you can cross ground that would otherwise swallow you. The water between the ridges is black, not muddy, black and clear, like strong tea held up to the light. It's stained with tannins, leaching out of decaying plants, which makes it acidic, and it holds very little dissolved oxygen. That has a consequence you can watch. Fish here come to the surface and gulp. Many carboniferous fishes could breathe air to some degree, and the lineage that walked onto land did it precisely because the water they lived in was so poor. Being able to take a mouthful of atmosphere wasn't an exotic talent here, it was basic maintenance. Kneel and look into that water, and you'll find one of the great quiet horrors of this world. And it's beautiful. Down among the drowned stems, something is waiting, squat, armored, mud-colored, the size of your hand, and then some. The larval form of the griffinfly you saw overhead, Meganeura, spent most of its life not in the air but here, underwater, as a nymph. And the nymph is not a lesser version of the adult. It's a better predator. Modern dragonfly nymphs carry a hinged, extendable lower jaw, folded under the head like a mask. When prey comes close, hydraulic pressure fires that jaw forward in a fraction of a blink, hooks close, and it retracts. On a nymph the size of a fingernail, it's remarkable. On something the length of your palm, hunting small fish and tadpoles in black water, it's an ambush you would never see coming. And then, this is the part worth sitting with, some dragonfly nymphs today also propel themselves by expelling water forcefully from the rear of the abdomen. They jet. A creature this size, sitting motionless in the peat-dark shallows, could cross the gap between you and it without a single visible movement of a limb. Cool water on your legs, something jets past your ankle, and that's simply Tuesday here. Follow the channel toward the coast, where the black water meets the sea, and you'd find a nursery. Small sharks, 10 or 15 centimeters long, hundreds of them, crowded into a warm brackish estuary. Each has a long, flattened snout that runs out ahead of the body like a paddle. Half the animal's total length, studded underneath with sensory organs. This is Bandringa, and the adults live far upriver in the freshwater swamps you just walked through. The pattern was worked out only recently from fossils in Illinois. Adults spawning in fresh water, then eggs or newborns carried downstream to the sea margins, where the young grew up in the shallows before making the journey back. It's the oldest known shark nursery on Earth. 310 million years ago, sharks were already sending their children somewhere safer. Stand in that estuary at dusk, and you'd see the whole shoal turn at once. 100 small paddle-shaped shadows, all facing the same way. Now, some things you would notice by their absence, and they matter more than you'd expect. No mosquitoes. None. Flies of every kind. The entire order that gives you mosquitoes, midges, horseflies, and gnats had not yet appeared. No ants either. No bees, no wasps, no termites, no butterflies or moths. No flowers, so no pollinators. So none of that low, constant working hum that fills a summer field in your world. The air is not thick with tiny biting life. You could sleep by open water in a hot swamp and not be bitten once. So what would you actually hear? Wind first, moving through fronds rather than leaves. A dry, papery wash rather than a rustle. Water dripping from a canopy that's always wet. The heavy, irregular slap of large amphibians, shifting in the shallows, wing crackle, and at certain hours, calling. We know sound mattered here because of a small animal from Scotland called Ballinurpaton. It's about 20 centimeters, unremarkable to look at, and it carries one of the earliest well-developed eardrums in the vertebrate record. A proper tympanic membrane tuned to airborne sound. An eardrum only evolves if there is something worth hearing. Something was calling in these swamps, and something else was listening. Whatever the sound was, it's the oldest evidence we have of animals on land using the air to talk to each other. Notice, too, that the day is short. The moon was closer, the Earth spun faster, and a Carboniferous day ran to roughly 22.5 hours. A year held around 385 to 390 of them. You'd never feel the missing 90 minutes directly, but your body would. Sleep would come earlier than expected, again and again, and you would slowly fall out of step with a rhythm you didn't know you had. And this swamp isn't the whole world. Walk far enough inland, up out of the flooded lowlands and onto higher, better drained ground, and the vegetation changes completely. The scale trees fall away. In their place stand chordates, tall, straight, genuinely woody plants related to early conifers, with long strap-shaped leaves up to a meter long. This is a drier forest, more seasonal, with real leaf litter underfoot and light coming through in shafts. It smells resinous rather than sour. Here the rain arrives in a monsoon and then stops, and the ground actually dries between storms. Go further still, south, across an ocean and onto the great southern landmass, and the world becomes unrecognizable. Ice sheets, real ones, kilometers thick, grinding across what is now Africa, South America, India, and Australia, leaving scratched bedrock and dumped boulders that geologists still find today. While you're sweating in an equatorial swamp, a quarter of the planet is under glacier. The Carboniferous was not a uniformly warm world. It was a world of violent contrasts, and the swamps existed only in a narrow, humid belt, hemmed in on both sides. That contrast is what drives the weather over your head: hot equator, frozen pole, and between them, an atmosphere trying to reconcile the two. The storms here are extraordinary. Heat builds through a short day. By mid-afternoon, the sky over the swamp turns the color of wet slate, and then the rain comes down in a solid, vertical, roaring wall that you cannot see through or shout over. Lightning strikes the tallest thing available, which is a 50-meter column of half-dry pith standing in water and in air holding 30% oxygen. That trunk catches. You'd learn to watch for it, a single crown burning, high up, in the middle of a rainstorm, fire that refuses to be put out by falling water, and then the smell of wet smoke, rolling low through the ferns, and every animal in the district moving in the same direction at once. Millipedes, amphibians, scorpions, all of it, all together, ignoring each other completely, which is worth remembering, because a fire is the only time this world is truly generous. Afterwards, the burnt ground is easy walking. The water's edge is littered with the drowned and the stunned. And for a few days, everything is fed. But food brings company, and once you've eaten well twice, in the same place, you stop being an observer here and start being a resident that everything else has noticed. The first rule of living here is that nothing knows what you are. In your world, almost every wild animal carries an inherited opinion about human beings, and that opinion is usually leave. Here, there's no such file. The upright, two-legged, slow-moving, warm-blooded thing wading through the ferns is simply new data, which means the animals of this swamp sort you the only way they can, by size, by movement, and by whether you're between them and something they want. Most of them, it turns out, would simply let you live. Sit still on a fallen trunk, and the small life comes back within minutes. Something the size of a coin walks up the bark beside your hand. Flat, dark, plated, eight-legged, with a body divided into neat armored segments across the back. That's a trigonotarbid, one of the most abundant land arachnids of this period, and it belongs to an entire extinct order. It looks like a spider that's been laminated, and it isn't one. Trigonotarbids had no spinnerets and made no silk. They ran their prey down on foot, in the litter, hunting the springtails and mites that swarmed in the rotting wood. Real spiders were here too, and they were tiny. There's one from the coal fields of France, Paleothyle, about a centimeter long, and it's a Mesothylae, the most primitive spider lineage. With the segmented abdomen its modern relatives have lost, its living cousins are burrowing trapdoor spiders in Southeast Asia and Japan, animals that dig a tube, line it with silk, lay out trip lines, and wait. So the technology of the ambush, the silk trap, the trip line, all of it was already invented and running here at a scale you'd need to kneel down to see. And then, on the underside of the same trunk, there's something you would recognize instantly, and that recognition is unsettling. Long, thin legs, absurdly long, a small, compact body suspended in the middle, moving in that particular hesitant, testing way. A harvestman, daddy longlegs, Carboniferous harvestmen, have been found so well preserved that you can compare them directly with modern ones, and they are startlingly similar. The same body plan, the same legs, the same unhurried walk. 300 million years, and this animal essentially stopped changing. Everything else in this chapter is alien to you. That one is a house guest. Move into the shallows, and the strangeness returns. Something is swimming through the flooded litter, and it has no legs at all, not reduced legs, none. A body about 70 centimeters long, snake-like, with 200 vertebrae or more, threading between drowned stems with a smooth lateral wave. That's an istopod, Ophiderpaton and its relatives. And it's an amphibian that gave up limbs entirely and went back to being a rope with a skull on the end. It hunted in the litter and in burrows. And it did all of this roughly 150 million years before the first snake existed. Evolution simply arrived at the same solution twice in two entirely different groups, separated by an eternity. Just past it, in a warm pool no deeper than your knees, is something small enough to hold. A little animal about 30 centimeters long, 4 short legs, wide flat body, and rising from the back corners of its skull are 2 blunt horns, curving backwards like the tips of a bicycle handlebar. Caraterpaton. It's a nectaridian, part of a group experimenting with a strange piece of head architecture, skulls that grew wider and more angular with age until in their later relatives, the head became a broad boomerang, wider than the animal's own body. Nobody is sure why. It may have worked as a hydrofoil, letting the animal rise sharply in the water column with a flick of the neck. It may have simply made it too awkward a shape to swallow. Sharing the pool with it is Microbrachys, 20 centimeters, extremely long-bodied, with 40-odd vertebrae and comically short limbs, keeping its feathery external gills for its entire life and never fully leaving the water. If you've ever seen an axolotl, you have the picture, a permanent larva, unbothered, drifting. Neither of these animals would fear you. You could crouch there for an hour, with your fingers in the water, and they'd swim between them. But the 2 animals you should actually watch are both small, quick, and easy to overlook because between them they own the future. The first is a slim, alert, lizard-shaped creature about 40 centimeters long, with longer limbs than anything else here, and a genuine turn of speed, Petrolacosaurus. Look closely at the back of its skull, and you'd find 2 openings behind the eye. The diapsid condition, the architectural signature that runs forward through lizards, crocodiles, dinosaurs, and every bird alive today. That little insect hunter, sprinting across a fallen log, is at the base of that entire lineage. The second is heavier, slower, about 50 centimeters, with a longer snout and larger teeth near the front of the jaw. Archaeothyrus from Nova Scotia, and this one has a single opening behind the eye instead of 2, which makes it a synapsid, which makes it, however distantly, yours. Every mammal that has ever lived, every whale, every bat, every mouse, every person you have ever loved, comes down the line that begins with animals like that one. 2 small predators hunting the same beetles on the same afternoon in the same swamp. Neither of them remarkable. Between them, most of the vertebrate life of the next 300 million years. Now look up, because the light is going gold and the air over the water is starting to fill. Mayflies, not the ones you know. These are their Carboniferous relatives, and the largest of them, Bojophlebia, carried a wingspan around 45 centimeters, nearly half a meter, and like mayflies today, they emerged from the water in synchrony in enormous numbers for a brief adult life spent doing nothing but finding one another. Modern mayflies have no functioning mouthparts as adults. Some live a matter of hours. So imagine the evening, thousands of them coming up off the black water at once, wings catching the low light, rising and falling in slow vertical dances over the channel. The sound is a soft, continuous crackle everywhere at once, and into that cloud drop the griffin flies, hunting through it the way a swift hunts a swarm, banking, folding their leg baskets, feeding without pausing. It's the most spectacular thing you would see here, and it would happen on ordinary evenings, without ceremony, for as long as the emergence lasted. You'd want to stand in the shallows to watch it. Don't, because the channel behind you has gone quiet, and the mayflies at that end have stopped rising. There's a line moving across the surface, low and long, and it doesn't break. It's awake. Under it is Folidurpaton, an embolomer, a fully aquatic tetrapod built like an eel with a crocodile skull, and it can reach 4.5 meters. The body is long, laterally flattened. The limbs are small and held tight, and it swims by whipping the whole trunk sideways. Its teeth are conical and slightly recurved, and in the largest specimens, the skull alone is longer than your forearm. It has been holding station in that channel since before you arrived. Amphibious ambush predators are patient in a way that has nothing to do with intelligence. It has simply been waiting for the water to tell it something is worth the effort. The correct move is not to run. Running in peat is how you fall, and falling is how the water gets your face. The correct move is to walk out sideways, along the ridge line you learned to read, keeping your steps flat and slow, breaking your own outline against a trunk. Ambush hunters lock onto silhouettes moving across open water, and the moment you stop being a shape crossing a gap, you stop being a target. You'd get out. Your heart would take a long time to notice, and in the mud on the bank, still fresh, you'd find the drag mark where something even larger came out of that same channel earlier in the day and went into the ferns and hasn't come back. You wake before the light because the frogs, which are not frogs, have started. There's a sound coming off the water that's hard to place. Low, wet, irregular, dozens of voices overlapping without rhythm, like someone slowly pouring water into a series of different-sized jars. It comes from the small temnospondylus in the shallows below your ridge, amphibomus mostly, hand-sized animals with big forward-set eyes and broad flat heads, sitting half-submerged in the litter, with only their eyes above the surface. Their descendants, in a very long time, will be frogs and salamanders. This morning they're just noise in the dark, and the noise is the closest thing this world has to a dawn chorus. You're lying on a stigmaria ridge, one of the woven root platforms that stands a few centimeters above the water table. Your back aches. Everything you own is damp and will stay damp. In 100% humidity, nothing dries, not cloth, not skin, not the inside of your lungs. Light comes into the swamp sideways, low through the trunks, and the mist over the black water turns pale gold, and then simply lifts all at once, as if something released it. This is the best hour of the day, and you'd learn to be awake for it. The water is glass flat. Insects are still cold and slow. A meter from your foot, a small animal is sitting entirely motionless on a floating frond, and it's one you'd come to look for. A land snail no bigger than your thumbnail, with a slim-spired shell, dendropupa. Some of the earliest land snails known, found in the fossilized tree stumps of Nova Scotia. It has spent the night grazing algae off wet bark, and it will spend the day hidden. Nothing about this animal is dramatic. That's rather the point. In a world of 2-meter millipedes, something the size of a grain of rice had already solved living on land, quietly, and is still solving it now. Breakfast is a problem you'd have solved by trial and error. You'd have learned to build a trap, a funnel of woven fern stems set in a narrow channel where the water moves, and you'd have learned that what comes out of it is never what you expect. This morning, it's 3 things: a small acanthodian, a spiny shark, 30 centimeters, with a stiff spine standing at the front of every single fin, which makes it awkward to hold and unpleasant to swallow, and which is exactly the point. That's the whole strategy of the group. Be a mouthful of needles. There are still cartilaginous fishes today, but the acanthodians as a lineage are gone entirely. The second is heavier, deeper-bodied, with thick scales and fins that are not fins in the way you understand them. Each one sits on a fleshy, muscular lobe, like a limb wearing a fan. That's Rhabdoderma, an early coelacanth. Its family will be presumed extinct for 80 million years, until a fisherman lands one off of South Africa in 1938 and changes what people believe is possible. You'd be holding a living version of the most famous ghost in biology, and it would be an ordinary Tuesday breakfast. The third thing in the trap you'd let go, carefully, using a stick. It's about 1 meter long, dark, and shaped like a thick eel, with a low fin running most of the length of its back. Behind its head, projecting up and back over the shoulder, is a single stiff spine as long as your hand. This is Xenacanthus, a freshwater shark, and it's the reason you don't wade at night. Its teeth are extraordinary. Each one carries 2 sharp prongs rising in a V from a central base, built for gripping rather than slicing, ideal for holding something slippery until it stops arguing. The spine is defensive, and in some specimens, it's grooved, which has led to long arguments about whether it delivered venom. Nobody's certain. You would not be the one to find out. By mid-morning, the heat has arrived, and the swamp begins to shut down. Near the equator, in permanent humidity, the middle of the day is not a time for effort. Temperatures push into the mid-30s Celsius, and the air holds so much water that sweat doesn't evaporate. It just sits on you. Your body's cooling system is running. But the world won't accept the output. You'd learn to stop. Everything else does. So you'd sit in shade, with your back against a sigillaria trunk, and watch a world doing nothing. And this is where the giant insects become ordinary, which is stranger than them being frightening. A griffinfly lands on a stem 2 meters away, folds those enormous wings along its body, and simply rests, turning its head in small increments to keep watching you, not hunting, not threatened, just present, in the way a bird on a fence is present. A millipede, the length of a canoe, works its way along the bank, its legs traveling in slow waves, taking 20 minutes to cover 30 meters, eating as it goes, entirely uninterested in you. You'd stop reaching for a weapon. That takes about 2 weeks. After that, the size of things stops registering as a threat and starts registering as scenery, and the swamp becomes strangely peaceful. Around 2 in the afternoon, the light changes. It goes flat and greenish, the way it does before hail. The air stops moving completely, and for a few minutes, the whole forest is so still you can hear water dripping from individual fronds. Then, from somewhere upwind, a sound like a wave arriving, rain hitting canopy, kilometers away, coming toward you. You have about 90 seconds. You'd have found a place for this, a hollow at the base of a fallen trunk, roofed with fern, and you'd sit in it while the rain lands on the swamp with a roar that removes every other sound in the world. Visibility drops to a few meters. The black water dances white. Lightning goes off somewhere behind the trunks, and you'd count, and the count would be short. And then it stops, as abruptly as it began, and the entire forest is dripping, and the light is honey-colored, and the temperature has dropped 5 degrees, and this is the second best hour of the day. Everything comes out at once, amphibians shifting in refilled pools, dragonflies rising off wet stems, drying their wings. The smell, this is the part you'd remember longest, is extraordinary. Wet peat, crushed fern, resin, decay, and something faintly sweet underneath from the spores. There is no floral scent anywhere in this world, and there won't be for 100 million years. But this comes close. Evening is when you'd walk. The ground is easier, the heat has gone, and the mayflies come up. You'd cross the root ridges toward the deeper channel to check whether the wake is there tonight, and on the way, you'd find fresh tracks in the wet mud. 2 parallel rows of small punctures, arrow straight, going down to the water and not coming back out. At the channel edge, in the last of the light, something large is lying half out of the water on the mud. It's about 2 meters, heavy-bodied, with sprawled limbs and a long snout, and it isn't moving because it doesn't need to. An early ophiocodont, a semi-aquatic synapsid, warming what's left of the day into its body before the night takes it. Another one of yours, another distant relative sitting in the mud, watching the fish. You'd stand there, and neither of you would react, because you'd both have decided some days ago that the other wasn't a problem. Full dark comes fast this close to the equator, and the night here is genuinely dark. No moonlight through the canopy, no glow on the horizon from a city that won't exist for 300 million years. Just black and sound. And the sound at night is roaches, millions of them, working through the rotting wood. And when you're lying still on your ridge, you can hear the whole forest floor moving. It's not a scuttle, it's a continuous soft crackle, spread across every direction, rising and falling, like rain that never lands. Somewhere below, something big shifts in the water and then settles again. You'd sleep with a small fire of spore dust and dry fern going, more for the light than the heat, and the last thing you'd see before your eyes closed would be the moths that aren't moths, paleotictopterans, with their long beaks, drifting into the firelight, circling and drifting out again. And in the morning, on your way to the trap, you'd notice something you couldn't quite name. The pools nearest the ridge are lower than they were, not much. A hand's width, maybe. The mud at the edge has a pale crust on it that you don't remember, and the calling before dawn, the wet overlapping chorus that has woken you every day since you got here, was thinner this morning, fewer voices, further away. The water keeps going down, not quickly, a hand's width a week, then a little more, and after a month, the ridge you sleep on is no longer an island, but a low hill in the middle of drying mud. This is not the end of the world. It's the ordinary breathing of it. Far to the south, the ice sheets over Gondwana are growing, and every meter of ice locked up down there, pulls a corresponding amount of water out of the sea. Sea level drops. The rivers cut down to meet it, and the swamp, which sits barely above the waterline at the best of times, begins to drain. It will come back. It always comes back. But the months in between are when you'd learn what this world is actually made of. The first thing that happens is that the swamp stops being one body of water and becomes 1,000 separate ones. Channels break into chains of pools. Each pool is a shrinking room with the wrong number of animals in it, and the concentration is extraordinary. Water that held 1 fish per cubic meter now holds 40. You could stand at the edge of a pool no bigger than a car and watch the surface boil with backs and fins, acanthodians and small sharks and lungfish all packed together, and every hunting animal in the district knows it. The dragonflies find it first. They hang over the shrinking pools in numbers you wouldn't have believed. Dozens of them, wings crackling, dropping onto anything that touches the surface. Then the big amphibians arrive, and they walk overland to do it. You'd see something come up out of the ferns that stops you completely. A head, almost a meter long, flat as a shovel, and set into the top of it are 2 eye sockets shaped like keyholes, round at the back and drawn out into a long, narrow slot running forward toward the snout. That's megalocephalus, one of the biphidids, and nobody knows what that keyhole was for. A gland, perhaps, a muscle attachment, space for something we haven't imagined. It's one of the most distinctive skulls in the entire fossil record, and it's currently dragging itself slowly and with enormous effort from one dying pool to a better one. Behind it comes something worse, 3 meters low, heavy, with a broad head and teeth in the front of the jaw that are frankly out of proportion, thick, curved, and long enough that they show when the mouth is closed. Anthracosaurus. Its name means coal lizard, and it was found in the coal seams of Scotland, and it is the closest thing this landscape has to a crocodile. In a full swamp, it would be one predator among many. In a pool the size of a bathtub, it's simply the end of the story for everything in there. You'd stop going near water at this time of year. Everything else is going near water, and that's precisely the problem. Meanwhile, some animals are choosing the strangest option available, which is to disappear. Watch the mud at the edge of a pool that's nearly gone, and you might catch it. A long-bodied fish, over a meter, working itself down into the soft bottom, twisting, driving deeper, until only a small hole is left. That's Catenidus, a Carboniferous lungfish, and it isn't dying. It's estivating. Lungfish dig into the mud, curl up, secrete a mucus cocoon around themselves, leave a breathing channel to the surface, shut their metabolism down to almost nothing, and wait for months, sometimes for years, breathing air, doing nothing, until the water returns. And we know this happened here because those burrows fossilize. There are places where you can find the vertical shafts in ancient mudstone, and in some of them, the fish is still inside, exactly where it went to sleep, having waited 300 million years for the rain. Above ground, everything else runs out of options at roughly the same time. The small pools go first, and they were the nurseries. Every amphibian larva, every dragonfly nymph, every young fish in them dies within days. That failure doesn't show up immediately. It shows up months later when the emergence doesn't happen. The evening mayfly clouds don't come. The dragonflies that would have hatched from those nymphs never take to the air, and the ones already flying have nothing to hunt. You'd notice the silence before you understood it. Fewer wings, then almost none. And then the carrion begins. A drying swamp produces death in quantities that are difficult to describe. The stranded fish first, in windrows along the old water lines, thousands of them. Then the amphibians that didn't reach the next pool, lying in the ferns with their skins split and drying. Then the large predators that came inland after them, too heavy to make the return trip. We find these layers. There are bone beds in the Carboniferous, where fish and tetrapods are packed together in a single thin sheet of rock, all killed at once, all buried before the scavengers could finish. That sheet is a bad season, 300 million years ago, preserved intact. And the scavengers hold a festival. The roaches arrive in a tide. That soft night crackle you'd grown used to becomes a roar, and it moves. You can hear it crossing the forest floor toward a carcass, and by morning, the carcass is a clean, articulated skeleton with a black living carpet still working over it. Millipedes come in behind them. Everything from finger length to Arthropleura itself, processing the litter and the softened wood. And behind the millipedes come the scorpions. Because a millipede boom is a scorpion feast, and for a few weeks, Pulmonoscorpius is everywhere, 70 centimeters of it, turning over bark at dusk. This is the chain, and it's worth following because it runs in both directions. The nurseries fail, so the flying insects fail. So the animals that ate flying insects starve. But the same drought produces carcasses. So the decomposers explode. So the animals that eat decomposers thrive. One half of the food web collapses, while the other half has the best year of its life. Nothing about this is balanced. The balance people imagine in nature is really just a long average, seen from far enough away that the disasters blur together. And then the fire comes. Because of course it does. Peat that has been underwater for centuries is now exposed. And peat is fuel. It's not the trees that burn worst. It's the ground. Peat fires burn downward and sideways, slowly, underneath the surface, and they are almost impossible to stop. You'd smell it long before you saw anything. Then you'd see smoke, rising directly out of the earth in places where there is no flame at all. And you'd learn to test the ground ahead of you with a stick, because there are hollows now where the peat has burned out beneath an intact crust, and they're full of ash, the temperature of an oven. The high oxygen air makes all of it worse, and it makes the aftermath spectacular. Fire moves through the standing lycopod crowns like something poured. And afterwards, for weeks, the wind carries fine black ash that settles on the water and turns every pool the color of ink. Then, one afternoon, the rain doesn't stop. The monsoon returns. The ice to the south gives back what it took, and the water rises, not gently. It comes up half a meter in a night. The pools reconnect, the channels refill, and then overflow their banks. And the whole flat landscape becomes a single sheet of moving brown water, carrying trunks, fronds, ash, and bodies. And the swamp restarts with an urgency that's almost violent. Within days, the lungfish come up out of the mud. Within a week, the spores are germinating in the burnt ground, and the first green is showing through black ash. Within a month, the pools have larvae in them again, and the evening air over the channel is thick with wings, and it's as if none of it ever happened. That's the rhythm of this world. Drown, dry, burn, drown again. It ran for 60 million years, and everything that lived here was shaped by it. But this flood brought something with it. 2 days after the water peaked, you'd find a track on the new mud at the edge of the channel. a wide, deep drag mark, far heavier than anything you've seen here, with the impressions of clawed limbs spaced well apart on either side. Whatever made it came up from the coast, on the flood, into water that has never had it before, and it went inland. You'd follow the track, because by now you'd have stopped being frightened of this place and started being curious about it, and that shift is the most dangerous thing that happens to anyone here. It runs inland for 2 kilometers through flooded ferns, and it's easy to read. A wide central furrow, as though someone dragged a sack, with paired limb impressions marching along either side. The stride is short. Whatever made it was in no hurry, and never is. You find it in a shallow bay at the edge of the new floodwater, and it's a Hibertopterid, the same broad, blunt, armored sea scorpion you saw dragging itself out of the shallows months ago. Except this one is bigger, considerably bigger. The Glasgow trackway that first revealed how these animals walked was around a meter wide, which implies an animal wide enough to fill a doorway and long enough that you would not want to describe it to anyone at home. Watch what it does, because it's oddly gentle. It settles into soft sediment and begins to rake. The front limbs are lined with dense blades and spines, and it draws them through the mud in slow sweeps, combing out anything living, then passing the scrapings inward toward its mouth, which sits on the underside of its body between the leg bases so that the animal effectively chews with the tops of its own legs. It's a filter feeder with armor. It has no interest in you at all. The sound it makes, working through wet sediment, is the sound of someone slowly stirring gravel, and it is completely, catastrophically out of its element on land. It came up on the flood because the flood carried it, and when the water withdraws, it will be stranded, and it will die here, and its body will feed the swamp for a month. That's the thing about the Great Flood. It doesn't just fill the landscape, it rearranges who lives where, because now the whole world is underwater, and everything about how this place works has changed. Look out across the forest, and there's no bank anymore, no ridge, no dry line, just a meter of brown water lying across hundreds of square kilometers of flat ground, with 50-meter trunks rising straight out of it in every direction. The light comes down through the canopy and lands on the surface, and the surface throws it back up onto the undersides of the fronds in slow-moving nets. Everything is doubled. Everything is reflected. You could walk for a full day and never see soil, and the water is thick with life that has moved in from everywhere at once. The griffinfly nymphs are the real winners. Suddenly, they have hundreds of square kilometers of shallow, warm hunting ground, dense with cover, and they're in it in numbers. That would make you careful about where you put your hands. You'd see them everywhere on the drowned stems, palm-sized and larger, holding still, waiting for that hinged jaw to be worth firing. Threading between them is something long and low that you haven't seen before, about 1.5 meters, with a flattened body, very short limbs, and a skull that's broad and blunt like the end of a shovel. Greer Erpiton. Look closely at its head, and you'd see fine grooves running across the bones in a pattern. Those are lateral line canals, sensory channels for detecting pressure changes in water, the same system a fish uses. This animal has legs and lungs and lives entirely in the shallows, feeling for movement in water too murky to see through. It has around 40 vertebrae in its trunk, which gives it an eel's flexibility and no ability to walk properly at all. Higher up, out of the water, the drowned world has pushed the land animals into the trees. You'd find them on every trunk above the flood line. Small reptiles clamped to bark, roaches in enormous sheets under loose plates of lepidodendron rind, scorpions wedged in crevices, and on a horizontal branch 3 meters up, sitting like something that belongs there, a short-snouted amphibian with a high skull, a genuinely terrestrial animal about the length of your forearm, wading out the water. That one has a name I enjoy telling people. It's called Phidexia. It was found in Pennsylvania, on ground belonging to a shipping company's facility near Pittsburgh, and the researchers named it after the company. 300 million years of evolution, and one of this world's better preserved land-dwelling amphibians is named after a courier service. You'd need to cross this flood, though, because your ridge is under it and your trap is gone, and everything you have is somewhere on the other side. And crossing means walking at night through a meter of black water in a forest that has become a fishing ground. Here's what you'd learn. Sound carries strangely over flooded flats. Flat water and hard trunks turn it into a corridor, so a splash 100 meters away arrives sounding as though it's beside you, and you can't see your own feet, and the bottom is soft peat with drowned branches in it. So every third step you'd snag and lurch. Halfway across, something moves behind you. Not a splash, a push. A low, heavy displacement of water that you feel in your legs before you hear anything. A swell arriving from the dark and passing you, and then the surface settling. You'd stop. You'd stand very still, which is the only correct answer. Rhizotus hunts here, 6 or 7 meters of lobe-finned fish, longer than the room you're standing in, with fangs the length of a kitchen knife, and in a flooded forest, a meter deep. It is barely deeper than the animal is thick. It hunts by lying still along the bottom in the shallows, and then striking with a single enormous convulsion of the whole body. It doesn't chase. It waits for something to walk within one body length of it, and then closes that distance faster than the water can get out of the way. Every predator like this fails when its prey stops behaving like prey. Movement is the trigger. Splash, hurry, panic. And you are the same signal as a struggling amphibian. So you'd stand there, in the dark, in warm water, up to your thighs, doing nothing, for as long as it takes, 10 minutes, 20. You'd feel your own pulse in your neck. You'd hear the roaches on the trunks, and the wind in the canopy 50 meters up, and the whole absurd machinery of your civilization-trained brain would be screaming at you to run, and the only thing that would keep you alive is refusing it. And then, eventually, another swell, going away this time. You'd walk the rest of it slowly, sliding your feet rather than lifting them, and you'd reach the far ridge, and you'd sit down and shake for a while. Now step back from yourself and look at what this whole cycle is actually doing, because this is the part that dwarfs every animal in the story. Every one of those floods buries wood. Every drought fells trees into standing water where they cannot rot. Every year, this landscape takes carbon out of the atmosphere, locks it into plant tissue, and then hides that tissue underwater, where oxygen can't reach it. Layer, flood, for 60 million years. And carbon dioxide is a greenhouse gas. Take enough of it out of the air and the planet cools. That is exactly what happened. The Carboniferous forests drew down atmospheric carbon dioxide on a scale nothing before them had managed, and the world got colder, and ice began to build at the South Pole. The same ice whose growth and collapse drives the floods and droughts you've been living through. The forest was cooling the planet. The cooling planet was drying the tropics, and the drying tropics would eventually kill the forest. This is the largest thing that happens in this entire story, and it happens silently over millions of years, with no drama at all. A landscape of soft, hollow moss trees, doing nothing more aggressive than falling over into water, changed the temperature of an entire world, and then wrote its own ending into the ice. And every gram of that buried carbon stayed exactly where it was, put underground, untouched, waiting for 300 million years until something clever enough to dig came looking for it. If you're still here with me, drifting along, thank you. If these journeys help you rest, you can quietly follow the channel so the next one finds you. Now, let's bring this world home. Imagine you woke tomorrow, and the Carboniferous had never ended. The swamps still stand across the equator. The oxygen never fell. Everything you've walked through for the last 8 chapters is out there, right now, on the same planet you're lying on. Start with the air, because it reaches you first. 30% oxygen instead of 21. Your first morning would feel extraordinary. Stairs would be nothing. Your recovery from any effort would be startling. And people with mild lung conditions would breathe more easily than they ever had. Athletes would rewrite every record on the books. At those levels, the effect on a healthy body is mostly benign. Oxygen only starts doing real damage to lung tissue at much higher sustained concentrations. But everything you own would become slightly explosive. Ignition is a chemistry problem, and oxygen is the variable. In air that rich, materials that merely smolder in your world catch and hold flame. A dropped cigarette in dry grass isn't a risk. It's a certainty. A kitchen fire doesn't get contained. It gets outrun. Firefighting as a profession would look completely different because water on a fire in that atmosphere buys far less time. Building codes, electrical standards, the design of every engine and every battery, all of it would have been engineered from the beginning around the assumption that fire wins, and there'd be no summer without smoke somewhere on the horizon. Wildfire seasons would be a permanent feature of every landscape, everywhere, wet ones included. Now walk outside and notice what isn't biting you. No mosquitoes anywhere. The entire order of flies never evolved in this world, which means no malaria, no dengue, no yellow fever, no Zika, no sleeping sickness. Malaria alone kills hundreds of thousands of people every year, most of them children, and it has probably killed more human beings than any other single cause in our history. In a Carboniferous world, that entire chapter of human suffering simply does not exist. No screens on windows, no nets over beds, no repellent, no bite in the night, none of it. That is, without question, the single greatest gift this world would hand us. And then it takes back something even larger. Go looking for breakfast. There is no bread because there is no wheat, no rice, no corn, no oats, no barley. Those are grasses, and grasses are flowering plants, and flowering plants do not exist here. No potatoes, no beans, no lentils, no apples, no oranges, no bananas, no tomatoes, no coffee, no tea, no chocolate, no sugar, no olive oil, no wine. Nearly everything humanity has ever farmed is a flowering plant, and most of our calories come from 3 species of grass, which means agriculture never happens. And if agriculture never happens, no one settles down, no one stores a surplus, no one builds a granary, and therefore no one builds a city, or a state, or writing, or a calendar, or any of the vast apparatus that grew out of people having more food than they could eat that week. Humanity in a Carboniferous world would be, permanently, what it was for 95% of its existence. Small mobile bands, fishing the channels, gathering spores and pith, hunting amphibians in the shallows, moving with the floods. Not a lesser life, just a different one. That never turned the corner ours did. There'd be nothing to domesticate either. No cattle, no sheep, no goats, no horses, no chickens. All mammals and birds, none of which exist. The most tractable animal in reach would be a half-meter reptile that eats insects and bites, and no dogs. Think about that for a moment. 30,000 years of the closest interspecies partnership in the history of life, and it never happens. Because there is no wolf to sit down beside the fire with. Now go to the water, because this is where daily life would change most. Every river on Earth would have freshwater sharks in it. Xenacanthus and its relatives lived in rivers, lakes, and swamps. And in a Carboniferous world, you would not swim in a lake casually. Ever. Children would be taught the rules about water before they were taught anything else. The rivers of Europe and North America, the Rhine, the Thames, the Ohio, the Mississippi, would hold 6-meter residus in their slower reaches, an ambush predator with fangs the length of a bread knife, sitting in the shallows where people wade. Fishing, on the other hand, would be spectacular. Every net would come up with things you'd struggle to name. Paddle-snouted young sharks, spiny acanthodians, lungfish coelacanths. Coastal towns would be built on it, and the great seasonal floods would be the axis of the entire human year. The whole population moving to high ground and back twice a year, forever. Then there's the sky, and the sky would genuinely disrupt us. You would not fly aircraft through this world without a serious rethink. We already lose planes to bird strikes. A bird the size of a gull ingested by a jet engine is a survivable emergency handled by an extremely well-trained crew. A seagull-sized griffinfly is the same mass problem, and there would be far more of them in the air, in swarms, at low altitude, over exactly the wetland flats where airports get built, and the mayfly emergencies would shut things down completely. Here's the part that isn't hypothetical. On the upper Mississippi today, mayfly hatches are so dense that they show up on National Weather Service radar as green blooms drifting off the river. Bridges have been closed because the layer of insects on the road made it too slippery to drive. Snowplows have been used to clear them. That's with insects 2 or 3 centimeters long. Now scale that to a wingspan of 45 centimeters. Once or twice a year, for a few nights, air traffic across entire regions would simply stop. Roads would close. People would stay indoors, not out of fear, but because you cannot see or move through it. It would be a public holiday in every country that had a river, a strange, roaring, beautiful few nights when the whole world was full of wings and everyone gave up and waited. The gardens would be different too. Turn over a stone and find a 70-centimeter scorpion, millipedes the length of a car crossing rural roads at dusk, with road signs warning about them, the way signs warn about deer. Most of it harmless, all of it enormous. And I think we'd be less afraid of it than you'd expect. Fear of insects in your world is partly a fear of the unfamiliar. and the swarming grow up alongside animals that size. Watch your parents step calmly around them, and they become weather. Big, slow, ordinary weather. But here's the true consequence, and it closes the loop from where we left off. There would be no coal. Coal exists because those forests died and were buried and never came back. Much of the world's accessible coal formed in this single period. The Carboniferous is named for it. If the swamps never collapsed, the carbon stays in circulation, in living wood and living water, instead of being pressed into seams under Wales and Pennsylvania and Shaanxi. And without coal, there is no steam engine worth building, no industrial revolution, no railways, no steel at scale, no electricity grid, no oil economy that grew out of the same appetite. The entire modern world runs on the fossilized corpse of a landscape that had to die first. So the trade is stark, and it's honest. A world where that forest survived is a world with no malaria and no cities, no mosquito nets and no wheat fields, no bites in the night and no books. Everything you have, this recording, the device playing it, the electricity behind it, the room you're in, exists because 300 million years ago, a swamp full of giant insects drowned and was buried and turned to stone. We are, quite literally, living off the dead, which raises the only question left worth asking. Could any of it come back? Not the swamps, the animals. Could the sky over your house ever hold something with a wingspan wider than your shoulders again? The answer is stranger than a straight yes or no. Let's be honest with each other for a while, because the truth here is better than the fantasy. First, the record. The largest insect that has ever lived was not Meganeura. It was a close relative called Meganeuropsis permiana, and it lived a little later in the Permian, in what is now Kansas. The wing fragments that survive give a span of about 71 centimeters, over 2 1/3 feet, and a body length approaching 43 centimeters. That's the ceiling. 3.5 billion years of life on Earth, and the largest flying insect ever to exist was roughly the size of a crow. There has never been a giant spider. There has never been an insect the size of a dog. The Carboniferous was extraordinary, but it was extraordinary within limits, and those limits are worth understanding because they explain why your world looks the way it does. The oxygen story is real, and it's been tested. Researchers have used particle accelerator, X-ray imaging, to watch air actually moving inside living beetles and to measure how much of the body is given over to tracheal tubing as the animal gets larger. What they found is that the plumbing doesn't scale politely. Bigger beetles have to devote a disproportionately larger fraction of their bodies to breathing tubes, and the worst bottleneck is where the legs join the body, a narrow opening that the tracheae have to squeeze through. Extrapolate the trend, and you reach a size where the leg joint would have to be almost entirely air pipe, with no room for muscle. That's the wall. More oxygen in the atmosphere pushes that wall back, and you can demonstrate it in a lab. Raise fruit flies over many generations in oxygen-enriched air, and they get measurably larger. The effect is modest, and it varies enormously between species. Some insects respond, some don't. Some grow smaller, but the underlying relationship is genuine. Body size in insects is negotiated with the atmosphere. Now here's the part that closes the door. Someone went and measured insect wing length across the whole fossil record and plotted it against reconstructed atmospheric oxygen. For hundreds of millions of years, the two track each other beautifully. Oxygen up, insects up, and then, in the Cretaceous, the relationship breaks. Oxygen rises again, and insects don't. Something else has taken over as the limiting factor. That something is birds. Once agile flying vertebrates existed, first the early birds, then the bats. A large, slow insect became a highly visible, highly profitable meal. Small and fast survives. Large and conspicuous does not. So, even if you filled the atmosphere with oxygen tomorrow, you would not get dragonflies back, because every sky on this planet is already patrolled by something faster than they could ever be. That door is shut, and it isn't reopening. Neither is the other one people always ask about. There is no path to bringing these animals back, and the reason is simple chemistry. DNA has a half-life. Work on well-preserved bones has put it at roughly 520 years for the shortest fragments under good conditions, which means that even frozen at -5 degrees, every readable bond would be gone within about 1.5 million years. Not degraded. Gone. The oldest DNA anyone has ever recovered is around 2 million years old. From permafrost sediment in Greenland, and pulling that off was a landmark achievement. Meganeura is 300 million years past that limit. There is no sequence to recover, no cell to work with, no chance. These animals are not sleeping. They're finished. And yet, look at what's still walking around on this planet. Because the giants never fully left. They just moved. On Christmas Island and across the Indian Ocean, there is an animal called the coconut crab. It's a land-dwelling hermit crab that outgrew the need for a shell, and it reaches 1 meter across the legs and weighs 4 kilograms. It climbs trees. It can crack open a coconut with its claws, which exert a grip force among the strongest measured in any animal. It hunts, it scavenges, and it lives for 60 years. That's the largest land arthropod alive today, and it's roughly a pulmonoscorpius in a different costume. In the present tense, right now. In the sea it goes further. The Japanese spider crab spans nearly 4 meters, from claw tip to claw tip. A living animal you could not fit in a car. And down in the cold dark, in the deep Gulf of Mexico, and off Japan, there are isopods, woodlice essentially, direct relatives of the small gray armored things under the flower pot in your garden. Bathynomus reaches 0.5 meter and weighs close to 2 kilograms, and new species of them are still being described. One from the Yucatan as recently as 2022. Why are they so large down there? Because the deep sea is running the old rules. The water is cold, which slows metabolism and extends life. It's rich in dissolved oxygen. Food arrives unpredictably. So being big enough to store a huge meal is an advantage, and there are no birds. Nothing has ever flown down there. Deep sea gigantism isn't an echo of the Carboniferous. It's a demonstration that the same forces are still available wherever the conditions permit them, and we have barely looked, depending on how you measure it. Most of the ocean floor has never been surveyed at high resolution, and the fraction of the deep sea that human eyes have actually observed is vanishingly small. Every serious expedition to the abyssal plains or the Hadal trenches comes back with species that were unknown when the ship left port. The colossal squid was named in 1925 from fragments in a sperm whale stomach, and the first live one seen in its natural habitat was filmed only recently. A juvenile, 30 centimeters long, drifting near the South Sandwich Islands. We named that animal 100 years before we watched it swim. So no, there is no lost valley with dragonflies the size of hawks, but the honest position isn't that the ocean is empty of surprises. It's that we are still in the earliest stage of finding out what's down there, and the deep has a habit of being stranger than the guesses. The Carboniferous itself is also still being discovered, which I find quietly thrilling. For most of the time, we've known about Arthropleura, the largest land arthropod that ever lived, an animal in every textbook. We had no idea what its face looked like. The head is soft, it detaches, it rots. Then researchers went back to juvenile specimens collected long ago in France, put them through modern scanning, and finally saw the head, the eyes, the antennae, the mouth parts, and the answer to what it ate. That was in 2024. The most famous giant of this entire period only got a face 2 years ago. New Carboniferous sites are still being opened, Mason Creek concretions are still being cracked, and the Tully monster is still unclassified after more than 60 years of argument. Trackways are still being found in quarry floors in Scotland and Nova Scotia by people who happened to look down. The past isn't finished, it's just slow, and there's one more thing worth holding, which isn't about resurrection at all. Every single animal you've met in this story left descendants or didn't, and the ones that did are still here. Roaches essentially unchanged. In the dark corners of your house, harvestmen on the underside of your fence, with legs that haven't been redesigned in 300 million years. Horsetails by the ditch, the last stubby survivors of trees that stood 20 meters tall, club mosses creeping across shaded ground, all that remains of the forest that made the coal, dragonflies over the pond, still hunting with a 90% success rate, still firing that hinged jaw underwater as nymphs, just smaller. You don't need de-extinction. Most of that world is still walking around at reduced scale, in your garden, being ignored. The giants are gone. The blueprint isn't. And when you next stand at the edge of a pond in the evening, and a dragonfly comes past you at speed, close enough that you hear the wings, that's the sound, quieter now and smaller, but the same dry, papery crackle that hung over black water 300 million years ago, when the same animal was the size of a hawk and the world was still deciding what it wanted to become. Something happens when you spend long enough inside a world like that one. The scale of it stops being a number and starts being a feeling. Try holding this. The Carboniferous swamps ran for roughly 60 million years, not 60,000. 60 million. Anatomically, modern humans have existed for something like 300,000 years, which means you could fit our entire species, from the first of us to you, lying there tonight, into that period 200 times over, and still have room. And for all of that time, the swamp did the same thing. Flood, drown, dry, burn, flood again. Generation after generation of animals, living out their whole lives inside a rhythm that never asked their opinion and never varied enough to notice. Nothing about it was building toward anything. It was simply a place being itself for longer than we can properly imagine. We tend to read the past as a story with us at the end of it. That little reptile in the hollow stump, we say, was the beginning of the line that leads to mammals, to primates, to people. And that's true in the sense that a river's source is true, but that animal wasn't a beginning. It was an animal in a bad spot, having a difficult morning, trying to catch enough beetles to make it to the next difficult morning. It had no idea it was standing at the base of anything. Nothing does. Evolution doesn't aim. It's just what's left after everything else stops working. I think the most interesting thing that world teaches is how much of biology is negotiation with physics. An insect's size isn't a design choice. It's the outcome of an argument between the width of a leg joint and the concentration of oxygen in the air. Change the atmosphere and the answer changes. Add birds to the sky and the answer changes again. There's no committee, no intention, no ambition on the part of the dragonfly to be large. There's just a set of constraints, shifting slowly, and bodies filling whatever space the constraints allow, which means the animals of that world weren't monsters or marvels. They were the local solution to the local conditions. Put a modern dragonfly in that atmosphere for enough generations, and it would drift upward in size too. Take Meganeura and put it in your world, and it would suffocate, not dramatically, just quietly, from the inside, unable to push oxygen deep enough into its own tissue. The giants weren't special, the air was. And the other thing worth sitting with is how ordinary the survivors are. Almost everything spectacular in that swamp is gone without descendants. The griffin flies, gone. The paleotic diopterans with their beaks, gone entirely, an entire order erased. Arthropleura, gone. The trigonotarbids, gone. The baphetids with their keyhole eyes, gone. Whole architectures of life, invented, run for tens of millions of years, and discontinued. What made it through are the things nobody photographs. Roaches, harvestmen, horsetails by a ditch, club mosses, lungfish, still doing exactly the same trick, still burrowing into mud, still wrapping themselves in mucus, still waiting out the dry with their metabolism turned almost off. Coelacanths, still down there in the deep reefs, off the Comoros and Indonesia, presumed extinct for 80 million years, and then simply not extinct. There's a pattern in that, and it isn't a lesson so much as an observation. Being remarkable is not a survival strategy. Being unremarkable, cheap to run, tolerant of bad conditions and easy to feed, that's what crosses the extinctions. The animals we find most impressive in the fossil record are, almost by definition, the ones that were expensive and specialized, and expensive specialists are exactly what a changing world removes first. The dragonfly by your pond isn't a diminished Meganeura. It's the version that worked. I'd also let go of the idea that this world was ever balanced. We talk about the balance of nature as though ecosystems settle into some correct state and stay there until we disturb them. Nothing in the Carboniferous supports that. That swamp was a machine for producing catastrophe. Every drought killed a generation of larvae outright. Every flood drowned the burrowers and stranded the swimmers. Every fire took whatever was too slow. Bone beds in the rock record hold thousands of animals killed in a single event, laid down in a sheet a few centimeters thick. What we call balance is just what a long series of disasters looks like when you stand far enough back that they blur into an average. Every living thing you have ever seen is descended from something that got through a bad year, and then another, and then a worse one. And the strangest part, the part I keep returning to, is that the forest ended itself, not through catastrophe, through success. Those trees grew so well and fell into water so reliably and rotted so poorly that they pulled carbon out of the atmosphere on a planetary scale. That cooled the world. The cooling built ice at the pole. The ice dried the tropics, and the dried tropics could no longer support the forest that had started it. Nothing malicious happened. No asteroid, no villain. A landscape simply did what it was good at for long enough, and the consequences arrived from a direction nobody could have watched. You can find that unsettling, or you can find it beautiful. It's probably both, and it doesn't require a verdict. There's a last thing, and it's smaller. Everything you've heard in this story, the wingspan measurements, the trackway near Glasgow, the keyhole eye sockets, the lungfish asleep in its shaft, the female shark holding the male's spine in her jaws for 324 million years. All of it comes from stone, from people in quarries and road cuts and coal tips. Looking down, the Bear Gulch fossils were found in a limestone outcrop in Montana. The Joggins stumps sit in a sea cliff in Nova Scotia that the tide re-excavates twice a day, so the fossils literally fall out onto the beach. The trackway that told us how a 2-meter sea scorpion walked was noticed in sandstone by someone paying attention on an ordinary afternoon. None of that world announced itself. It sat in rock, silent, for 300 million years, and it only became a story because a species evolved that couldn't stop asking what was underneath things. And that species is you, lying still in the dark, thinking about a swamp. There's no conclusion to draw from any of this. It just is. A world existed fully in every sensory detail. The smell of wet peat, the crackle of wings, the sound of rain arriving across a canopy, with nobody there to witness a single second of it. 60 million years of afternoons that no one saw, and then, much later, a few of those afternoons turned into rock, and the rock turned into coal, and the coal was dug up and burned to make light, which is, in a roundabout way, how you came to be hearing about it now. So, let's go back one last time. Close your eyes and let the air change again. Thicker in your chest, richer, almost sweet. No grass beneath your feet, no flowers anywhere, no bird song, not one note in the whole world. And that shadow crossing the ground, the size of a hawk's shadow, which isn't a bird. You know what it is now. You know the wingspan, 65, 70 centimeters, your arms held out at shoulder width. You know it doesn't buzz, that the sound is dry and papery, like cards being shuffled near your ear. You know its eyes are built from thousands of lenses and see almost everywhere at once, and that it doesn't chase, it intercepts, calculating where you'll be instead of where you are. You know it spent most of its life underwater, in the black shallows, with a hinged jaw folded beneath its face. The first time that shadow passed over you, it was the strangest thing you had ever seen. By now it's just the 4 o'clock dragonfly, and that's what a place does to you. It stops being a spectacle and starts being where you live. You'd know this swamp by the end. You'd know that the ground is a lie, that peat quakes, that the woven stigmaria ridges are the only reliable floor, and that you can read them by the slight rise and the firmer line between pools. You'd know to test a head with a stick after a fire. You'd know that the pale crust at a pool's edge means the water is going and the hard months are starting. You'd know that the middle of the day is for sitting down, that the light goes flat and greenish before the rain, and that you have about 90 seconds, that the hour after a storm is the best hour there is. Everything dripping, the temperature dropped, the whole forest smelling of wet peat and crushed fern and resin, and that faint sweetness from the spores. You'd know not to run in water. That running is how you fall, and falling is how the water gets your face. and that when the swell passes your legs in the dark, the only thing that keeps you alive is standing perfectly still and refusing every instinct you have. You stood there once, for 20 minutes, in warm black water up to your thighs, listening to roaches on the trunks and wind in a canopy 50 meters above you, and then the swell went away again. You'd remember that for the rest of your life, and you'd remember the small things longer than the large ones. That's how it always goes. The snail on the wet frond at dawn, no bigger than a thumbnail, that had already solved living on land, while everything else was still enormous and confused. The harvestman under the log with its ridiculous legs, moving exactly the way harvestmen move in your own garden, 300 million years away and unchanged. The little horned one in the knee-deep pool, that would swim between your fingers if you left them still long enough. The lungfish, going down into the mud as the water failed, twisting, driving deeper, sealing itself in, and simply waiting. Some of them are still there, curled in their shafts in ancient mudstone, exactly where they went to sleep, still waiting for a rain that came and went 290 million years ago. And that nervous, quick, unremarkable little animal in the hollow stump, hunting beetles in the dark, with no idea it was anything at all. None of them knew. That's the part that stays with me. Not one creature in that entire world knew it was living in a golden age, or that the air was extraordinary, or that the forest beneath their feet was quietly cooling the planet and writing its own ending into ice at the far south. They just got on with the afternoon. 60 million years of afternoons. The mayflies coming up off the water in the low gold light, thousands at once, and the griffin flies dropping through them, the blue-green glow that might have been moving across the litter on clear nights, the rain arriving as a sound, crossing the canopy from kilometers away, the single burning crown high up, in the middle of a downpour, all of it happening perfectly, in full detail, with nobody there. And then the ice came, and the rain became unreliable, and the swamps broke into islands, and the islands dried. The scale trees went first, then the amphibians, then the oxygen slipped away over millions of years, and the ceiling came down on the giants, and the wings got smaller, and then there were no wings that size at all. Everything sank into the water it had lived in, layer on layer on layer, pressed flat under the weight of the world and left. And it's still there, under Yorkshire, under Pennsylvania and Kentucky, under the Ruhr, under Silesia, under Shanxi, black seams of it running for kilometers, 300 million years deep. The flattened bodies of trees that were really just enormous mosses, and the spores that fell through them, and the ash from the fires, and here and there the print of a wing. The whole world you just walked through, folded into rock and forgotten, until we dug it up, and burned it and turned it into light. And here you are, warm somewhere, in a room that exists because of it, listening to a voice describing a swamp that stopped existing before there were bones in the sky, before flowers, before grass, before anything that would recognize you. Everything that world made, it made without knowing. And in your garden, right now, in the dark, a harvestman on a fence post, moving in that slow testing way, horsetails by the ditch, knee-high, ribbed and jointed, the last of a family that once stood 20 meters, a club moss creeping through the shade of a real forest, roaches in the quiet corners, unchanged, unbothered, still working, and over the pond, when the evening comes, the dry papery crackle of a dragonfly going past, quieter now, smaller, but the same sound. Let the air go thin again, let the trunks fade, and the black water and the mist coming up off it in the first light. Let it all settle back into stone. And if you'd like another, the channel will be waiting